We going all out, about to start a war now. Second time around, so we doing it in style. It's all elite, not accepting defeat. A lot can change in 1 year, but more can change in 1 week. Believe the hype, the train's leaving tonight. Hit the throttle, we headed straight to Chicago. It's only getting better, this is our future endeavor. I can't wait to see the fight between...
Welcome back, All Elite family, to another exciting episode of Wednesday Night's Main Event. If you're new to Wednesday Night's Main Event, it's our weekly episode where we talk about everything new on AEW Dynamite, and then at the end of the episode, we give our match of the week, or in this case, match of the night, seeing as there was no dark this week. But AJ, we're fresh off of Dynamite. How were your thoughts on the episode?
I liked it. I thought overall it was good.
It was a big main event tonight, you know. We have Jericho teaming up with Sammy G going up against SCU for the tag team championships. At one point, I even thought, we might see a title change by a big surprise or something of that nature, and we didn't actually get that, which I'm glad about. But there was a lot to talk about on this week's episode. But what were your thoughts just on that main event?
The main event, honestly, I wasn't feeling it. It wasn't my favorite thing on the card. It wasn't my least favorite either, though. It was fine. I wish it had more time. That was my biggest thought, was it was way too short. But for what it was fine. And I was not happy that Jericho got beat with a roll-up, but he did.
Yeah, that's an issue they seem to be running into a lot, is that they're running short on time in the main events, or at least we would have to be left to assume so. Based upon just how much time they are leaving these main events, sometimes running into a situation, maybe 10, 12, 15 minutes here, so not a ton of time that I would have liked to have seen given to this match, as you said, and I'm not too disappointed with the way that the loss comes. It's more of like a surprise loss for Jericho. He didn't necessarily lose clean, but it sets up an opportunity for Scorpio to potentially get a title shot down the line or something like that, which I think would be interesting. But I think that overall, and it was something that I tried to allude to, could happen on our last episode. So it's nice to be right, thinking that, hey, maybe Scorpio's going to be the one to pick up a victory over Jericho. And with that being essentially what I asked for, I can't really complain about this match at all. A solid main event. Again, I'm with you there on the fact that there was a little bit lacking in the time department, but otherwise it wasn't too bad. And they had teased the possibility of going to YouTube at the top of the hour because the match was going to be a 60-minute time limit.
They worried me for a second there, man. I was like, am I going to go on YouTube?
Yeah, I was a little bit worried if that was what I was going to have to do, and a lot of people obviously wouldn't have seen the finish. I get it, though, because you don't want to have that fact of the finish is definitely coming with that last minute or so. So I understand that, and it worked out. It added to that little intensity of, I really would like this match to end now. Despite the fact that I wanted it to have more time, I didn't want to have to change where I'm watching it, because that's really hard to get people to do. Sometimes it would take minutes, and it's just not the best way to do it, especially if it's Jericho's first loss or a title change. Either one of those would have been what would have come from this, and you don't want to do that on a different platform that you started your show on. But nonetheless,
for sure, especially
a good finish.
With the tag titles.
Yep. But let's just jump to the beginning of the show now. We open up, we get a recap of Omega versus Moxley from Full Gear. They run down the fact that Kenny Omega isn't medically cleared to compete tonight. And this is actually all that we see of Omega on the show before they announce that we're going to get Moxley in the opening match. So they tease that a little bit, and then we end up getting Moxley versus Michael Nakazawa in what was a very short 1-minute match, exactly what we needed. But Nakazawa sort of dropped his fun and games gimmick of everything and did things a little bit different. It didn't work well for him. He still lost in under a minute, but it's nice, the story of Omega's friend trying to step up for him. So, and it's no one from the Elite. I think that's an interesting point to note as well.
Yeah, you're right. I like that. And I was into it for a second. I was like, yeah, I get a Michael Nakazawa, but that ended very quickly. I like that a lot. I like that he threw the baby oil and he was all business and trying to defend his boy. But I thought this did its job. I thought it was good. Moxley gets a win. Nakazawa looked kind of cool for a brief second.
Yeah, and then Moxley gets to cut a promo right afterwards, essentially laying down a challenge for anyone in AEW to step in the ring with him and sort of go to the limit that he did, which is interesting because they've noted that Tony Khan mentioned that there won't be a lot of matches like this going forward. This might be it for maybe another year or so, which is something I like. It's refreshing for me to hear that with something we've requested on this show, so it's nice to hear that that's how things are going to be going, because in all reality, it makes sense, but it is interesting to see the direction they're going, and we'll get into it more as we go through the recap, but it'll be interesting to see the direction they're going if they're not going to do a hardcore style match with who addresses Moxley's promo. From there, we get Dark Order taking on the Jurassic Express, and the Dark Order ends up picking up the victory here in about 9.5 minutes. A decent little match, but I think that it lacked in terms of showcasing the Jurassic Express in ways that we've seen in prior weeks. And with them taking a loss here, they end up getting everything, the momentum back and everything by the end of the match. But initially, I was really disappointed and wondering how much further we were going to bury these two. I mean, not bury them because it's not like it's intentional, but they should have picked up a win by now.
I agree with you, and they're not on the rankings. I was thinking, okay, this is the way Jurassic Express, gets one over, gets up, gets a win. But nope, they lost. And this was kind of, I don't know, I didn't like this match. I wasn't into it, and I don't know. There was something, I didn't dislike the match, but it was just something was off, and I wasn't really vibing, and it was kind of longer than I would have liked, and I thought maybe you could have cut this down, made the main event longer if any of the matches were cut down.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily how much I agree there, just because at that point we would have had a lot of short matches. And but I do think that I can understand necessarily not being too engaged in this match, just for no other reason. The Jurassic Express, as I said, they really have no momentum anymore.
Yeah.
And without Luchasaurus, it was a lot harder to get into them. Now, by the end of this match, Evil Uno was inviting Marco Stunt to join them.
This was cool.
This was at first really confusing, though. I was like, what the hell is going on? Then by the end, and when I realized that, this is how they're going to bring Luchasaurus back, I was like, hell yeah, because during the media scrums that he did during StarCast, he's saying at best maybe January, well, not at best, but at worst January, but his hope was as soon as possible, and it turns out that he's able to return on this week's episode of Dynamite in spectacular fashion. The fans were loving it. It was huge on social media. It was a huge moment in general, and it looks like this is how the tide will turn for the Jurassic Express, which is awesome.
Yeah, I popped really hard for this. I was like, oh my God, he was a little slow, and that's okay, but he was a little slower on the kicks than I think he normally is, and that, I think it showed a little bit, but he was awesome, and the crowd was on fire for it, and I'm hoping, to your point, that this is how we start gaining momentum for the Jurassic Express, where we start building them back up.
Yeah, they were able to close this segment, all three men standing tall, and just looked really good for the three of them. So that was exciting, and it was just nice, again, refreshing to see this group. And they really haven't been focused much on television either, so maybe that's part of the problem. Like, it's good that their losses haven't been in front of a national audience, like every single loss hasn't come on TV, but it is difficult to get into them. So hopefully this return and everything will be really huge for them, because Jungle Boy alluded that they have a lot of things they've yet to be able to showcase between them, and that's the one thing I love about Marco and Jungle Boy. That's why I can understand not being too into this match, but I was still super engaged, because those two, they're so innovative, and they do so much different shit that I've never really seen, that I really think is cool and interesting. So I think that Jungle Boy being able to do more with Luchasaurus, and him noting during those media scrums, like, hey, we have so much we didn't even get to. I think that there's still a lot left to be seen.
Oh yeah, and I agree with you. My thing really was the Dark Order, dude. I'm not into it, and they're boring the hell out of me at this point.
Yeah, I can understand that. I guess the reason that I didn't have that big of an issue with that is because by the time Luchasaurus was interacting with them, I was loving it. Like, I don't think the Dark Order works the best with smaller teams, because we don't want to really see them be the ones dominating.
Yes.
We'd rather see the Dark Order sort of, and that's what I thought. I thought this was going to be a feeder match for Jurassic Express to sort of start getting them some wins with beating like an established team in the Dark Order. Instead, we didn't get that. But I do like again, Stu Grayson, his work with Luchasaurus was awesome. I would love to see a singles match between those two.
Stu Grayson is a machine.
But I do 100% understand those two sort of pulling you out of this match once again, where it was a little bit different. And it was nice to at least see Evil Uno get some mic time to, like, where we don't love these guys, but if we're going to establish them as an important team, this is something that needed to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
And then we get Darby Allin taking on Shawn Spears and Peter Avalon in a triple threat match that went really short, actually, about 4 minutes after Joey Janela interferes and takes out Shawn Spears. Something that Excalibur mentioned was totally legal because it's a triple threat match, so it was good to at least get the commentary explaining why there wasn't a disqualification here. Something that fans online like to pick at and point out a lot. And so I was fine with that. It's cool to see the Spears and Janela thing sort of continuing, and makes a little bit more sense why Joey didn't get that victory at the pay-per-view. And they did actually continue it on social media. They gave Joey about a minute and a half on their Twitter to cut a decent little promo on Spears. The one thing I will note about the promo that I didn't like, I'm pretty sure you haven't seen it yet, but he ends it with, "I went from undeniable to uncontrollable," and it's like everyone's gonna just bite this undeniable thing, and it or whatever it is, you know what I'm trying to say. They're just gonna bite that, and it just sounds corny now. You're almost degrading Cody's promo by doing that. And and Janela's promo itself was good until that point, and I was like, it's just like, it didn't have to be that. But otherwise, I'm interested to see where this goes. Darby ends up picking up the victory over Peter Avalon while Spears is outside of the ring, and then after, Darby gets a mic and he just says, "Jon Moxley, I accept." And this was another moment in the show where I popped, and I was like, hell yeah.
This was amazing. I think we both marked out for this one. This was my favorite part of the show, I think, was just that very quick sentence from Darby Allin saying, "I accept." That was just so good. And I was like, oh my God. Because I didn't even think I wanted to see Darby Allin and Jon Moxley. It wasn't even on my radar. But the moment that they presented this to me, I'm losing my shit.
Yep, it's a perfect little, like, feud for Moxley and Darby. It's like another star-making feud for Darby as his star literally just continues to grow. Every week, this guy, he literally gets more over every week on television, and it's so cool to see, like, how much he's transformed as this independent guy on Evolve to now being this superstar. And he did a media scrum where he basically said fuck Evolve. So it's cool to see that now that he's given this opportunity to have his own creative outlet and do his own thing, that he's becoming such a success. I mean, the skateboard, the look, everything about him, his moveset. I just think everything about Darby, despite his size, and I think his size probably even helps him a little bit in being that underdog role. It's just so great, and so I'm excited to see that Darby's on his way to challenging Moxley. I was almost thinking we might get that Darby versus Shawn Spears feud me and you were talking about, but this is way better.
Way better. And talking about feuds we are clearly not getting Kip Sabian and Joey Janela, which was weird because I even heard Dave Meltzer talking about how he came to that conclusion too, that Kip Sabian and Joey Janela would be having some kind of angle with the promo, the way they put it at Full Gear, but I guess not, which is fine. I'm into them continuing the Shawn Spears and Joey Janela feud. I think it's solid, but I thought it's noteworthy that we're apparently not going to have that happen.
Or what it could be is something a little bit new in professional wrestling, where it's like intertwining stories, you know. I mean, and we've obviously seen intertwining stories before, so it's not totally new. But if they do it right, it'll make sense. Where maybe Joey's just way more focused on Spears, but Kip is really just dying to get under Joey's skin with this Penelope Ford thing. So I think it'll be something we have to wait and see and sort of see where they're going, or maybe it was just a way to establish, like, hey, Penelope's with Kip, and this is how we do it to just cuck Janela really quick and then just keep it pushing. We don't have to do that feud right away. But just with the placement of it and everything, I would really like to see that feud. I think it would be a good establishing feud for Kip and Joey. I think Kip can work well, and Joey can also wrestle really well. That I think it would be an interesting, like, oh shit, these guys can really go, and these guys can really be like stars for the company. Almost the way that Sammy G and Darby have excelled over the last 7 weeks. That was something I really thought about during tonight's episode. Was like, well, we're 7 weeks in, and Sammy looks great, and I never would have expected it to be this way, the way he transformed into this new character. And Darby has just established himself as a real, like, top guy almost. So
absolutely.
And that's a cool one to see, is just Darby. And so him accepting Moxley's challenge, in 7 weeks ago, it wouldn't have felt right. But now they've built him up and pushed him just enough to where that's going to be a sick little feud.
Yeah, absolutely will be.
And then after that, we get Nyla Rose beating Danny Jordan in about a minute and a half. Danny Jordan gets very little to no introduction. Essentially treated as a legit jobber, one of the first legit jobbers in AEW. Someone that I don't expect to necessarily be brought back the same way that Jamie Hayter and Shauna have been. Still a decent little showing for Danny, and just losing. She didn't look bad. There can be a lot of matches where even when you're just feeding to someone, if you're not selling the right way, it looks bad. So it was short, sweet, and to the point. Made Nyla look all right. Not really anything to write home about though either.
No, I didn't really like this. I didn't really care about the whole match. I don't know. Nyla Rose is losing heat for me. I don't know about you, but I kind of stopped caring.
I don't know. I think they'll have to do something where she beats someone a little bit more legitimate. But I do like seeing her being given the opportunity to sort of dominate really quickly and not look bad in doing so. Because like I said, there's something to be said about a good squash where it's just no issues are really had. Because especially with someone like Nyla, where you're supposed to be that beast and you're a little bit green and a little bit new to the business, but you're supposed to dominate, and you go to do a power move and it looks like shit. I didn't really see too much of that in this short match, and I haven't seen too much of it from Nyla at all thus far. So just in not looking like shit, I think it's done enough to establish Nyla for me to be like, okay, I'm interested to see where this goes for her. And she's obviously still going to be someone that's pushed like a legit important person. So I'm really I'm impressed with Nyla. I'm a little bit, I think this is where we differ again here today, is that I'm pretty impressed by Nyla and how much she's improved and how much I'm just willing to just be a Nyla Rose fan. That's cool. I'm just super into because she's good, and and that was something that I was on the fence about. I didn't want to just be oh, I'm into Nyla Rose because she's a transgender wrestler and trying to do something different, and AEW is trying to do something different, so I should root for her because that's what they would want. No, I wanted to see how good she was in the ring, and now I've seen that she's at least serviceable and doing well, so I want to see her now excel and become better and get at this point in AEW, where I think another match with Riho down the line is going to be a lot better than the first one was, and it'll be way more exciting, and I could see her potentially having a real run down the line. So
we'll get to this in a second. I think part of it for me is that Kong is back now, and you have two characters in the women's division who are basically monsters destroying the division. And I feel like it's a really uphill battle for Nyla Rose, who to me right now seems like the lesser Kong, because Awesome Kong is here. And you can't expect me to not care more about Kong as the main monster. You know what I mean?
I think the only case of that is I would at this point just sort of like to see these two clash in some way.
Yeah.
Maybe see that be some type of face turn or something for Nyla, where she comes out and saves someone that you wouldn't really have expected because she wants to get that win, or say it's Riho and Awesome Kong is getting ready to kill Riho, and Nyla comes out and saves Riho just because she wants to have Riho in a one-on-one. Something like that I think would be interesting to see those two cross paths, and then eventually Nyla take out Kong. The one thing I will say is it's at least good that they haven't brought Kong out yet, because you're right. So at least they gave Nyla 6 weeks or 5 weeks to really get the ball rolling for herself, and we'll see how it stacks up, because the tough part is a 1.5 minute squash match, despite how good she looks. we'll get to it, but it's still not going to look as vicious as Kong destroying Allie and pulling out a knife. So we'll get to that here in a minute. But from there, we get a medical update on Dustin Rhodes. They talk about how he should be back in about a month or so. Interesting how they're selling this arm angle. Cool for him. I'm excited to see him return and do something short, because Dustin only has a little while left, and what he's done thus far in AEW has been good. So short runs, and if anything, it'll just be him putting over MJF a couple of times. So
yeah.
And the thing is Cody will need him eventually. The numbers are starting to add up. And the Elite, you can see in AEW, are not as tight as they were in New Japan or Ring of Honor, where they have each other's backs every time they're getting destroyed. We've seen that a lot in AEW, so something just to definitely take note of.
Yeah, I think you're dead on with that.
And then from there, we have an announcement of a Dynamite Dozen Battle Royal that's going to take place next week. A little bit, I'm interested in this because I don't really...
Diamond Ring.
Yeah. Go ahead and run this down, the announcement, AJ.
Well, they announced a 12-man Battle Royal where the final 2 will face off in a one-on-one match. So I guess it's a gauntlet match. For a diamond ring, and they didn't really say what that diamond ring would do. Maybe it's just a diamond ring, but I think it's interesting. I like it as a concept. I like just having things on the line, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if it's going to be contendership or what.
I hope that's what it at least becomes, because that's the one thing I don't love. I like having things on the line too, if they mean something. If it's something like a Money in the Bank type of thing, or a ring where whoever has it has the number one contender. But that's weird because we do also have rankings to work with. So I'm curious to see what the ring means and what they do with it, and if it's just a ring to have. Because Cody does seem to have an infatuation with rings as well. He had his ring when he was in Ring of Honor and all of that. So I could see it just sort of playing this role of a secondary championship or something, which I would like.
I'm thinking of it like King of the Ring almost.
Weird still.
It is weird, but
because in wrestling, your goals are championships, not rings. So if anything, this would have been, if it's not going to be like a number one contender type thing, then I would have rather it been we're crowning the TV champion, and this is how. Because what's also confusing is I'm not sure if it's working the way you say it is, or if it's just a battle royal and then the final 2 are going to compete the next week.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Because that was sort of worded in that way, where we might see a battle royal next week, and then the final 2 in that battle royal will then compete in the following week. That's something we'll have to wait to get a little bit more clarification on, but that's at least how I interpreted it. So just interesting to see that they have something new planned out, and we'll have to wait and see how it goes and who ends up winning it. If it's a number one contendership, I feel like it should be Pac, but we'll have to wait and see exactly what it all means, because that was the one problem I had with it, is it wasn't very well explained.
Yeah.
From there, we get Tony Schiavone, and he's interviewing Allie. This goes back to what we were just talking about. Allie ends up being interrupted by Kong and Brandy Rhodes. They both attack her. Kong lays out Allie. Brandy cuts off her hair. And we continue to do this thing where even Jim Ross is saying, what is going on? I don't understand this. So I'm not going to shit on it right now, but I'm just kind of with JR, and I don't understand what's going on. I mean, I like it, but I also don't know what the hell is going on and what it all means and what for, and how much I really want a supernatural angle in the middle of a totally, there's nothing else like it going on in AEW, and I understand it's supposed to be the buffet of professional wrestling, but
I wasn't even thinking of it like supernatural. I was just thinking of it as Kong's a badass who's killing people and taking trophies. I don't know if you remember in TNA when Samoa Joe had the bloody towel where he would just sop up his opponent's blood, and before it was a red towel. But that's what it reminds me of. It's just this brutal monster coming in and taking trophies.
That would make way more sense if they didn't have these Brandy vignettes beforehand of everything.
It's only one.
And all of that. But outside of that, I just feel like there's some type of thing here where they're trying to get everyone's hair, and somehow it makes Kong more powerful to defeat Brandy. I hope not, but that's kind of what I'm interpreting it as, especially with these vignettes and how I've seen it. So we'll have to wait and see, but that's why I'm not just going to sit here and shit on it. I'll wait and see where things go, but I'm with Jim Ross where I'm like, I don't really get it. After that, we have Chris Jericho come out, and he's calling Cody Rhodes a bunch of names. He's talking about how he finally wants his thank you. We get Cody Rhodes' theme song. Cody Rhodes is not the person who comes out. Instead, it's MJF. MJF cuts a pretty sweet promo on Cody, calls Cody selfish, and talks a bunch of shit about Cody. Then him and Jericho go back and forth about if MJF is going to join the Inner Circle, and that's kind of where things got to be too long here. This was a good segment that went kind of like by the middle of it and then came back in the finish, so that was good. But once MJF and Jericho are like, do you want me to join the Inner Circle? Do you want to join the Inner Circle? I was like, this is played out. This is too much.
That was funny for a second, and then it stopped being funny after like the 5th time.
Well, and of course, I'm still wanting MJF to destroy Jericho and just continue to be this random tweener. Which I'm glad at the end of the day that they didn't, because it's cool that he's just going to be this certified heel, and I think any heel in his position wouldn't just destroy Jericho right away. He would wait to see how he can use Jericho and then try and destroy him. So it was interesting, and it did tell a good story, and it was nice to see like MJF's not just sitting here going, "Oh, please let me in your group," and Jericho's not begging him to join either. It's a little bit more story aspect to it there. But then finally Cody Rhodes does come out. He goes to attack both men, but then he gets jumped from behind from Wardlow, who finally makes his debut. And the second I saw it, I was like, this is freaking genius. This is perfect. Like, Wardlow is the muscle for MJF, and both men just look perfect in suits, and like they just look like a great little duo now, and it's a sweet thing, and it'll give someone to consistently help MJF pick up victories and be a schmarmy heel, and be legitimate despite his size. So that was cool, and it was a good debut.
I think it confused some people, because I think some people were under the impression MJF and Wardlow are in the Inner Circle, which would be weird because then you have two big guy heaters on the Inner Circle. But it's clearly MJF is solo with Wardlow as his heater, which is great, like you said. At first, I wasn't sure. I was like, does MJF need a heater? But I don't know. Just seeing Wardlow kill Cody, I was like, this is cool. I don't care.
Yeah, I think it's really, and I think that it's a perfect slot for Wardlow, if nothing else, because being paired up with MJF is going to be great for him. If at one point MJF ever wants to turn on him, it'll make Wardlow a super baby face. Like, just the things that they could do with it, and the way that they can make this a great story down the line, I think is perfect. And again, like, Wardlow is totally new and fresh to a lot of fans, if not like probably 99% of AEW fans have never seen a real Wardlow match, or like seen a lot of him, if nothing else.
I haven't.
So it's cool to see this new face and him being given an opportunity alongside another new face. Like, he's not just here protecting Jericho or Cody or like people that we already know. Like, him and MJF are now giving this opportunity to shine as a new unit in professional wrestling, and I think they're going to do a fantastic job. So,
I think so too. I think this is going to be a really, really cool team, I guess I would call it. I actually, that would be a cool, if they start doing tag team matches with the two. I would like that too.
Yeah, so I think it's a nice little unit here for AEW, and it's a nice thing that they've got building here. Like, and I can understand the confusion a little bit, but I don't think it's that confusing to me. I see the Inner Circle as one unit, and then MJF and Wardlow as something totally different, and that's what's going to be great, is now we have new, like, established heel groups or factions or whatever we're building here that are going to just make AEW better as time goes on. So that was great. Then we get Pac versus Hangman Page in the rubber match.
Great match.
Yeah, good. Another great match between these two. That's one thing that they continue to have, is pretty fantastic matches. But I think that this continued story with them trying to push the low blow is one thing that's sort of taken me out of every match. The first match with Pac winning off of the low blow, and then at the pay-per-view on Saturday, he goes for the low blow, Hangman catches it. Once again, same thing here tonight, Hangman catches it, but instead Pac picks up the victory. Still a good match, though.
Pac very definitively won. I noticed that. He just kicked him until he was
Well,
knocked out.
that's the one thing that was confusing, I guess. And again, that's where some things in AEW tend to just pull me out of the match because I have to say, what the fuck is going on? Bryce is sitting there trying to push Pac away, and Pac is just kicking him in the back of the head. We're like, okay, is it a knockout? Is it a disqualification? Because if you're the referee, dude, and he's just continuing to kick someone in the back of the head, like if this were in MMA or like a real fight, this would be thrown out because he's not listening, and he's like, that's attacking the back of the head is what you don't do. And then from there he hits the what's it called, the
black arrow.
Yeah, the black arrow, and then locks him
in the brutalizer.
Yeah, locks him in the brutalizer. And again, like you said, a definitive finish for Pac. An interesting finish because it just shows like Hangman had his win over Pac. He could have kept it going, but instead he wanted to run it back and ends up suffering a brutal defeat due to it. So we'll have to see where Hangman goes from here.
I can't expect that it's going to be anything but a heel turn, right? Because he's broken at this point. He's just beaten and done.
I would say so, but at the same time, I don't know the faces that they would have to really take his position.
That's
now, you
true.
obviously do have Cody, and you have Kenny, and then you have Rising Darby, and they've done a little bit with Janela, but even my personal bias for Janela isn't going to make me act like he's some super over babyface yet. I think he has the potential for sure down the line, but it's still going to take time. So I think pulling Hangman in that direction at this point might not be the best idea unless Pac sort of transitions to, like, I mean, I wouldn't say Pac is even a heel at this point. He's just a badass. But I just don't know, and I think that it'll be interesting to see where Hangman goes because if they didn't call it a rubber match, you would almost think that this feud wasn't over. Like you said, it was a decisive win, but outside of the decisive win, like shout out to Joseph, the infamous Joseph. He sort of called this the WWE style 50-50 booking, where I it's hard to disagree with him in the sense that Hangman won on Saturday, we come right back around on Monday, and Pac won, and this is apparently the blow off, but neither man really were elevated or. Like, I mean, I think Pac never really lost his spot as, like, one of the top guys, and Hangman never really was able to benefit from this feud, which sucks because this was the feud we were talking about from day one that could be the first AEW, like, championship feud, remember? We were thinking that Hangman could be the first champion or he'd be facing Pac for the title down the line in the first feud, and it's been going on from the beginning of AEW, essentially since January. And it really just hasn't elevated. I mean, Hangman has been elevated, but I don't necessarily know if this feud has elevated him. I think it's been more so his matches.
Yeah, honestly, I've been more interested in what Hangman's doing on Being the Elite than what he's doing on TV, which is not good.
Yeah, he's had some solid matches on TV, and I think the most interested I am with Hangman is when he's teaming with Omega. So and so that's not what we're going to get very often from him. So I would like to I'm curious to see where they go with him next because Hangman he's good and he's way over. So that's where I wouldn't turn him necessarily, but I do feel like his character is just I don't know where we're going for it. So we'll have to wait and see. From there we cut to a Young Bucks and Pride and Powerful brawl in the back. This goes on pretty long too. I think in a night where we were running short on time for our main event, or at least it felt like it. We had a really long Jericho segment, and we had a really long brawl here where Pride and Powerful end up destroying Nick Jackson's leg with the sock and the baseballs. They end up putting Matt Jackson through the stage. Brandon Cutler comes out to check on his boys, but he gets beat down. And then finally, Private Party come out, and the referees are finally able to separate everything. This was a really cool beatdown. Again, sort of reminiscent of what we saw last week, and a good way to see the continuation of the Young Bucks and Pride and Powerful feud, but obviously we don't know if there's another pay-per-view or a big event coming up, so instead they're able to transition that feud off a little bit. Like we're sort of hurting the Young Bucks, maybe killing them off for a week or two, while Pride and Powerful now get to go on and face Private Party next week, in a match that I think is going to be really interesting. Next week's card is pretty stacked. Pride and Powerful taking on Private Party, and we also get Moxley taking on Darby Allin. Two really badass matches for just a regular episode of Dynamite and the Battle Royal, yes. So pretty stacked card overall.
Yeah.
From there, go ahead and talk about it. We should.
I was just gonna say, I was interested, like you said, how long this went on, and to a point, I felt like you could have done this shorter, or you could have done this in a way where it kind of, I don't know, got to the point quicker. And also, I didn't really love that you had Private Party come out, and then the very next second you have the card up saying Santana and Ortiz versus Private Party. I was like, okay, that seems like this was set up.
Yeah, way to rush that. That was the one thing I could agree with you there. I was kind of like taken aback at just how quick it was done. That was the one thing. They could have just waited to do it on social media. I get wanting to plug it on television, but that was a little weird. And it was just, like I said, really long, really, really long. It went before the commercial, all the way through the commercial, all the way into the main event, which, again, felt like it ran short. So it was a little bit disappointing.
Yeah.
And then we cut to our main event. We get SCU taking on Sammy G and Chris Jericho, something that we talked about at the beginning of the episode, but we'll go ahead and just talk about it again a little bit. Cool to see SCU continue to rack up victories as champions. That was something I was thinking about. They're doing a lot of defenses early, but that's fine because then they're able to just be a team that has a lot of wins, and that separates them from the rest of the division as it should as champions. So their record is going to be one that I think will stand out from the rest of the division as it should. That's cool.
It is cool, and I don't know. It just seems like they're a cool tag team right now. Like they're just strong, and I think that's the best thing because I don't know who could it be to knock them off. I'm thinking the Lucha Brothers are going to have a feud, but now at this point, I don't know who's going to be the next team to come at them. And I'm excited to see what it's going to be because they look really, really strong right now. They beat the champion. They rolled up the champion. And the more I'm thinking about that finish, the more I like it because it just makes them look really, really good. Like, damn, SCU is a cut above the rest. And as good as Jericho is, when it comes to a tag team with Sammy G, he just doesn't have enough to beat SCU. I like that too. But the only thing is, I wish this was longer because if this was like a good 20-minute or 15 even match, it would have made so much more sense to have Jericho lose here.
Yep, and I think the only complaint I have at this point is I would just like to see Scorpio start being able to pick up some victories like with his finish. And I know they were able to do that on Saturday at the pay-per-view, so this sounds a little bit confusing. But like most of their finishes have been like roll-ups or like the very first tournament match where they finished it was a botch. Like, and I know I've been hanging on that, but it's like left a really bad taste in my mouth in terms of like how they're able to finish their matches just because that one adds into the 2 roll-ups, and that's 3 matches where they ended kind of shaky. Where that's the only thing holding SCU back for me. Outside of that, they've been a fantastic team, a great unit, and they're doing a great job. I expect to see them continue to elevate, and who knows, maybe they somehow swing this into like a Christopher Daniels versus Chris Jericho match.
I'd love that.
That would be interesting. God, I
didn't even think about that.
I could see it happening for sure because just I like, even though it was Scorpio to pick up the victory, just somehow they swing it as SCU beat them. Now Jericho give SCU a title match. No, Scorpio doesn't want it, actually Daniels does, so I think that would be an interesting way to go with it. But nonetheless, a good match overall for the main event of Dynamite. What match do you think was your Wednesday night's main event?
I really like Pac and Hangman, but I don't think I can call it my main event just because, like you said, that kicking the hell out of his head and then Bryce pushing him back, it confused me too. I'm going to go with the main event for the main event, but if I could pick a promo, it would be Darby Allin accepting Jon Moxley's challenge.
Yeah, right. That was even short, sweet, and to the point, and a really great, decent little promo. I have to agree with you. If you're going to watch a match from this week's Dynamite, it would be the main event. The one thing that's interesting coming off of this week's Dynamite is that, like, coming out of it, I was like, oh, this was a good filler episode. Like, this was an episode to build to next week's episode, basically. Which is cool because going into this week's episode, we had 2 really high-profile matches announced where you wouldn't have necessarily assumed this would be filler. But in all reality, like, that's what it feels like to me, is this is a build to next week's show, which is good. That's the way to do it. But that really wraps up our coverage on Dynamite. But before we close out, there were a couple of news notes that I did want to cover that we saw earlier today. One of them being that Nick Jackson had mentioned something that we've talked about quite a bit here on the All Elite podcast, that we will see the records reset for the roster. Something we should probably expect in January, as he mentioned. So something that would be a yearly thing in January. Really excited to hear about that. Really great news for fans, just because to have that confirmation and not something that will be sprung on you as a surprise in December. We have the announcement very early in November. We know in a couple of months everything will be reset. Everyone will have a fresh slate. And that'll essentially be like their New Year's Dash or their draft type show where everything gets a nice little new revamp and we have an idea of where things are going forward. And I like that. I like that announcement and that confirmation there, just to cover those things. What was the other bit of news, AJ?
Tony Khan with the saying that there won't be any unsanctioned matches for a while, right?
Oh yeah, we did talk about that during this episode, but I do want to mention it again that it was cool to see something else that we have basically requested on this show is that we don't want to see these unsanctioned matches shoved down our throat. We want to see the allure of them built up into this mysterious stigma of, well, there was one last year and it was so hectic that we couldn't even show the highlights on TV that much. But now, here it is again. Like, so instead of doing it, because I understood the story purposes and everything of running through 3 of them so quickly, but now it's cool that they've got them out of their system, and it seems to not be something that we're going to force fans to see on a constant month-to-month basis, which is good. It's good to see, and it's good to see that they're as we round out and get into week 7 and week 8, and like things really become more established, that they are getting better with some things. I would say the main thing they have to work on is just their time.
Absolutely. The matches themselves are not the problem, like you said. It's just how often they're happening. And so to go a very long stretch of time, even if they're lying, even if it's 6 months from now, that's fine with me anyways. I'm fine with just having a good long period of respite where it's just a break from it and I can forget that it even existed, and then you bring it back and you really surprise me.
Yeah, and again, it just adds to the importance of it and makes it that much more crazy when you're not overdoing it and like, even I understand the desire to do it, even like, I mean, you say 6 months and whatever, but even like, don't even do it like, as long as it's not yearly, like, or where it's, every year at this pay-per-view we do a hardcore match because it has to be that way. That's another thing that I don't love in wrestling, where sometimes that cliche has to happen where, well, we did it at this pay-per-view last year, so we have to next year. But outside of that, I'm excited, and that was a good episode of Dynamite. Not the best, not the worst, but definitely a good episode coming off of the pay-per-view, and an interesting way to start seeing where things should be shaping up going forward.
Like you said, a good filler episode. I liked it. I had fun watching it. It did everything that I was hoping it would do, and it left me wanting to watch next week.
Yes, exactly. But as we wrap things up, AJ, go ahead and plug your social media.
You can follow me on Twitter at BigMatchAJ, and you can follow me on Instagram at AJTheFitzy.
And you can follow the podcast on Twitter at All Elite Podcast. You can always follow us on Instagram at All Elite Everything. You can check out our website, alleliteeverything.com. You can check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/AllElitePod. And as always, you can catch me on social media on Twitter at All Elite Andy. Once again, big shout out to everyone for tuning in, who tunes in every week and gives us any feedback, likes, all that type of stuff. We really appreciate it. And until next time, thank you for tuning in. See ya.
Bye.